Hello, everyone. This is Marco Magalhães, and I'm so happy to be here with you guys today. And I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties starting the stream today, but here we are, and we're so glad that you were able to join us and watch the video later. And Today we're going to be talking about spirit life, which is I want to bring to you guys some of like interesting questions about what is life in the spiritual world, right? And in order for you to do that, we're going to be talking about the Spirit's book. We're going to be talking um, about heaven and hell. We're going to talk about so many different books that Spirit has brought to us, right? And as we usually do every Sunday here in our lectures, we're going to start with a prayer, and then right after that, we're going to have our lecture for today. Okay? So let us all at this moment elevate our thoughts and our minds to our Master Jesus, our spirit friends, mentors, all those around us, all the spirits that are going through a hard time and suffering. May God bless each one of them. And may we also be blessed in this moment of teaching and learning so we can learn a little bit more about who we are as spirits and use that to grow as individuals and as spirits. Thank you very much, everyone. So let's all, hello, Katarina. I see you join us here. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So let's go straight to the point, right? Because we already started a little bit late. So I think it's important that, go talk about the spirit life, right? That's what we're here to talk about today. Okay. So let me tell you one thing. So one of the most common questions, right? If for someone who's starting spiritism, or for someone who's been a spiritist for a long time, right, or someone who's never actually heard about spiritism, is that question like, what happens next, right? Uh, like what is life, right? After our existence right now, right? Um, and if you think about it, there's a lot of questions there that we may not be able to answer like completely, right? It's pretty clear that a lot of things we don't know, right? But it's spiritism brought to us a lot of things that are actually quite helpful, right? And 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 can help us so much in understanding who we are in our lives, right? So if we go to the book Heaven and Hell, for example, this book provides so many examples of life after our incarnated life, like our real spiritual life, right? Because that's really who we are, right? We're spirits. So the incarnated time points that we are here is just a little part of who we are as eternal spirits, right? The Spirit's book has like numerous questions, they go through details, right, of who we are, right? And then we have very specific examples, like Andrea Louise, for example, brought many of them to us that give like real life examples of what is actually does it mean to be in our spiritual existence, right? For example, in Heaven and Hell, not only that, it explains to us like God's justice, like what is justice from a spiritual perspective. It compares religious theories about what is heaven and what is hell, right? And then gives us the examples, right, from spirits that lived, incarnated, and then what's happening to them now that they're discarnated. Okay, so so the question is like, so what happened then, right? So what happened after we discarnate, right? So it's going to be quite surprising to understand that there's not actually a lot of changes that are going to happen from what we are and what we think and what we do. So we continue being who we are, right? There's no transformations that occur immediately after, because every time we change, you need a lot of effort to do that, right? And then, like, what are we gonna become, right? So what do we become after? So that's one of the questions we hear all the time. And the thing is that we're ourselves, right? We can present ourselves differently because our body, physical body, that is gone, right? That one's gonna go back to earth, right? It's going to be recycled, right? It's going to be reused, like everything else in our existences, right? But who we are, our spiritual body is still with us, right? And that can be remodeled, reshaped, right? And we can present ourselves in different ways. But the truth of the matter is, like, who we are as a spirit is still the same, right? And a lot of people think, oh, look, is it going to be a better life? Like, I'm going to be, after I disconnect, things are going to, I don't know, like, I'm going to be like in this beautiful fields of green, right? Enjoying life in paradise. It depends, right? It depends again on who we are and what our thoughts are and our actions and what have we done, right? During this past incarnation to determine kind of what the next steps are going to be, right? And not only that, there's this transition period, right? That is also, it's a critical moment, right, for us. But we don't know exactly what happens, right, during that transition period. But then Spiritus brings to us, and Andrelouis brings to us, right, a lot of that knowledge, right, that for sure, certainly, is going to be very helpful for so many of us. Okay, yeah. So let's go more details now, more examples, right? So in Spirit's book, question number 278, Allan Kardec, on a comment, is going to say something that's quite important for us, right? He's going to say that the spiritual world is like a great city, right? Where individuals of all social classes and conditions see and meet one another without mixing together, where societies are formed by similarity of tastes, in which vice and virtue elbow each other without speaking to one another. It's like we actually form this network, this society, from obviously we're talking about from a spiritual perspective, right? um, that will continue to exist, right? And that's why when you look at, for example, um, like some of the books that describe spiritual cities, for example, they have this incredible resemblance, right, to our cities right now, right? So isn't that interesting, right? So and Kardec is explaining that to us that we'll continue to evolve, not only at the individual level, but as a societal level, and all together as our planet evolves, society evolves, and that will be translated in the spiritual world. So even that, right, is going to be interesting because um, if you, again, if you think about it, right, it explains very well, like how are the descriptions of André Louise and through the books of Chico Xavier, and how the civilizations that were described in those cities are very closely connected to us, right? So that's quite interesting. And not only that, see the similarity of tastes, right? So obviously we'll combine and join forces with a lot of spirits that are in a way similar to us, right? And that's just of, um, part of who we are, part of our nature, right? But in a way, like if you're thinking about good things and doing good actions and vibrating in good ways, so that will all be combined and be joined together, creating a very nice and pleasant experience. But if you're vibrating in not such a good way, right? If your vibrations are low and things are not really going in a good direction, right? You can start to think about how you're going to coalesce and combine with spirits that are vibrating the same way. And then we may run into trouble, right? Because we're going to create an environment around us collectively in that scenario where things are not going to be very happy, right? And that is a situation where sometimes you hear the descriptions of the hell, right? Or the suffering, right? That incredible, continuous suffering that is described in so many religions. And this is not, again, like I said, this is not really in Spiritism per se, right? But many religions are also described as the situations. And in a very similar note, right? Um, you can have the descriptions of heaven, right, in which you have this happy exciting, existence, again, because collectively the spirits will be bringing that together and creating that environment, right? When we discarnate. So in a way, no, there's no punishment. It's not that you're forced to live in places that are not pleasant or helpful. All of those things really are a reflection of who we are as a spirit, what we carry in our bag, right? Um, the and how we're going to face with the consequences with our own actions, right? And that is sometimes not an easy thing to do. You can probably imagine that, right? Depending on what we've done, right, in our previous experiences. Okay. So moving on so now that's like the basics of kind of the next steps, right? Um, Now, if you move on, let's go now to the next topic that I want to bring is more like a number of questions that in the spirits book that are going to go through very specific points. Like, and I kind of selected um, some of the let's say more the burning questions that I hear sometimes, right, about spiritual life. Okay, so for example, one thing that I hear quite often is that when we discarnate, like and we don't have a body anymore, right? Um, and we basically present ourselves in the other side, right? How are going people are going to see us, right? And that is a great question because realistically, people are going to see us exactly who we are, right? I just want to share my screen now for my slides to go through um, those questions. So the first thing is that we are what we think, right? And we can't hide, right, in the spiritual world. That is something that is scary, right, for a lot of us. Because here in the incarnated world, we can kind of get away, right, with hiding some of the things that may not be very nice about our character, right? We can package them deep inside, right? We can um, put a face that looks different from what we actually really feel, right? We can do a lot of things that allow us to live in society, you know, um, and maintain some sort of social fabrics network, right? And in some moments, we show that because that's who we really are, right? But in the spiritual world, we can't do that. People are going to look at you. What they see is what you're thinking. Now, think about this. Like, how many times you're thinking one thing and you're doing exactly the opposite, right? Or you're acting in a way that is disconnected to what we really think. Like, we do this quite often, right? Um, Now, in the spiritual world, the spirits are going to look at you and they're going to see exactly what you think. And you can even tell them, like, this is not true. I'm such a nice person, never done this. It's actually right in there. Your thoughts are just telling them exactly the contrary. So that creates a problem. Because if you think about you encapsulate our ego and we create this little capsule around our ego to protect ourselves, right? From the consequences or the challenges of who we are. When we take that out and we're naked, right? We're people are seeing through us and understanding who we are. For a lot of spirits, that is a shock, right? It's unbearable shock, right? Because we're exposed to basically who we are, right? And sometimes it's not beautiful. It's okay. Like we're gonna learn, we're gonna grow, we're gonna change, but it is a shock, right? It's like you're going through a therapy, but it's an instantaneous therapy that instead of taking years to understand your own traumas and who you are, you basically in 1 second you realize that everyone already know who you are, right, including yourself. So what about remember our previous lives? That's another question I get all the time, and that's question 304 to 319 in Spirit's book. So we do remember almost immediately the recent things about our previous lives. Depending on your level of evolution and understanding, and how prepared you are to know what you've done in the past, then your memories from the past can go quite long, right? Quite way back. But that is typically for spirits who already are ready to understand that. So, um, what about sympathies and antipathies in the spiritual world? Oh yeah, that obviously happen, right? And that are dictated by as Allan Kardec explains to us, they're they're dictated by the relationships and our thoughts and the history between two spirits, right? And we're going to give great examples of that coming up when I talk about Andrea Louis' books. Okay. Another concept that a lot of people explore quite often these days is the idea that you have like another half, like another spirit that it kind of merges with you to make one, right? And in love stories, you hear that all the time. But the truth is that we do not actually have to have another half to be complete, right? In a way, I'm not trying to break the love stories here. There are spirits that have been together for several incarnations, and they certainly love each other and they work together for many incarnations, and that's beautiful. And that happens all the time. But actually, we are created completely independent and free to grow and to develop, right? So we actually um, don't need to have another half, right, or another partner spirit in order to be growing in our road of perfection. Truth is, actually, we interact with multiple other spirits that help us along the way, right? But we actually don't need to have that completion to be complete, right? That's put it this way, right? Good morning, Marcio. I see some people coming in. Good morning. Good morning. So, what about familial ties in the spiritual world? Well, one of the most common criticism I hear when I'm talking about spiritism is that people that actually don't understand what spiritism is typically would say that familial ties are disrupted or destroyed in a spiritual perspective because a mother could be a father, could be a kid, it could be a grandfather one day, and then can come back in another family, and then restore friendships, and then they separate again. So, in other words, that those family ties are kind of lost in the way. That is actually the exact opposite of what happens, right? So, spiritual ties, in a way, are become this this a love bound relationship only. So in other words, like it gets to a point that it really doesn't matter what is the relationship when you're incarnated. What really matters is like the connection between the two spirits, the love that unites them. And then it doesn't matter where they're coming together or not in the genealogical tree, right? Many times you're going to be parent and son and parent again with the same spirits, and again, that highlights the fact that the really uniting factor behind all this is love, is not really the relationship of where we are. Actually, in a way, it strengthens dramatically because you start to realize that it doesn't matter if in this incarnation I'm this or that. What matters is that in my real life, with the spiritual life, we're always together and we're always going to love each other and we're always going to thrive to have that motherly love, right? That kind of closely resembles that. So, in other words, we're going to have that beautiful, deep love that we have for our babies, for everyone, right? And that is really what Jesus is telling us, that love one another, right? So, what better way to practice that by actually having different experience with different families throughout the ages and creating this enormous network of love that connects everyone, independent of hierarchy, right? So that is like one of the key elements that I think that people ask quite often about spiritism, right? Another question that people have sometimes about life in the spiritual world would be, do spirits have subordination or authority over others? Now, this obviously spans from a history of people enacting this idea that when we discarnate, we're going to be judged and assessed by someone sort entity. And this judging entity, which has some sort of hierarchical powers over us or authority over us, will tell us what to do. Right? This is a little bit illogical if you think about the way evolution works, right? Because what happens with the reality in the spiritual world, yes, there is a hierarchy in the spiritual world, but it's not based on power or knowledge. It's only based on moral principles, right? So the spirits that are more elevated in a moral perspective will have the ability to influence other spirits that are not as morally evolved. In other words, like a highly evolved spirit can um, for example, facilitate another spirit that is suffering to improve, right? Because of their moral hierarchy. or they prevent them from doing something that they really want to do, but they're going to hurt themselves. The best example for that is like if you think about a family, right? And and if you think about, like a parents with the baby, for example, and the baby is really trying to go down the stairs, but they can't do it. If they go, they're going to fall, right? So we as parents have the ability to prevent that baby from rolling down the stairs because they're really not really thinking carefully, understanding the consequence. So we can influence the baby typically by holding them, to not go down the stairs and hurt themselves, right? So, in a moral perspective in the spiritual world, spirits can do the same. So, morally elevated spirits can help other spirits that are going through some situations to guide them, right? So that is an authority, right, from the spiritual world perspective, but not the way we typically learn about this, which is like someone kind of judging other spirits. That does not happen. Actually, that does happen, only in scenarios where, typically spirits that are not morally evolved, they are still connected to traditions of things that they've learned during their incarnation for a long time, create this evil base, like this low vibration type scenario where they try to make other spirits subordinate to them in a negative way, right? That can happen, right? And this typically happen in umbrals and places where all the spirits are vibrating in very discordant and very low frequency vibrations, and they allow those spirits to temporarily enact some sort of power, the way we see power on Earth, right? Which is completely different from the spiritual world. But the spirituality is always helping those cities, right? They're always helping those places, and they're always help guide those spirits, right, to take them out of there. So in the end, everybody's going to evolve. Everybody's going to be perfect one day, right? It's just that we go through very, very different roads. Next question. So, are relatives and friends always united after death? No, that's sometimes does not happen, right? And it's not because we're prohibited from doing that. It's because we create the barriers that prevent that from happening. Great examples of this, like for example, let's say someone like commits suicide or does certain acts that will immediately transport them to a situation of suffering and pain, and that act itself creates a barrier around them that will prevent certain spirits from approaching them. They will basically create they will leave disconnected, right, from certain spirits, and even if they wanted to connect, they're not able to because of the vibration differential, right? Some spirits are going to be a lot in much, much higher vibration states and places, right? Compared to other spirits that are going to be suffering quite a bit and they're not able to be reached, right? That's typically what happened. It can also happen because of consequences of actions. Like I said, someone uh, it will do something that hurts another person, and the direct consequence of that is that their conscious is going to be so affected by this, they live into this closed circuit existence of suffering and pain, right? That is not reachable, right, from the outside. So they basically separate them from other families and friends. Now, for most spirits that have a balanced life and are have love as their guiding principle in general, for most spirits, yeah, they can reunite with a lot of other friends and relatives when they discarnate. So it really depends again on the moral evolution of the spirit, right? So it may happen, but it may not happen for a long time, right? It really depends on us, really, right? There's no one there taking notes on a notepad and telling us like, you got to do this, you got to do that. That does not happen. Okay. Next question: is there hatred or enemies among spirits? Oh, absolutely. Remember, the first thing we mentioned is that we are really ourselves, right? And now, if you think about it, like some of the situations that we lived in this experience, with building up that negative vibration or hatred against another person, when we disconnect, that really doesn't go away immediately, right? It will eventually go away, right? But for certain periods of time, you can have that. I'm going to give examples coming very, very soon in the lecture about this. And another interesting question is, um, so what about cities and the spiritual world? Like that's something that is mind-boggling to a lot of people, right? Or like buses and cars and things like, spirits are not really bound to that. They can move, right? So why do we have those? That is actually something quite interesting. So the closest the spiritual cities are to our existences, the closer they are in resemblance to what we have here, right? As I mentioned to you, we evolve not only in an individual way, but also in a collective way. So cities will also evolve. So the collection of individuals that live together, united by the same principle, will also evolve to a point that there's zero resemblance to our current cities here. Yeah, there are spiritual cities that are very elevated, that they have zero, nothing like even close to what we are. And basically they probably don't even have any type of matter, right? It's completely evolved to a point of that. And then from that scale down to the bottom, you're going to have spirits, for example, in Solar, which are actually quite similar to cities on Earth. They're organized, they're 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 beautiful, organized and clean and all of this, but they resemble very much with like ministerial relationships. And why do we need buses? Well, a lot of spirits still need that because they're so tightly connected to needing to move around with something carry them, or because they haven't really evolved to a point of managing their volition, right? So they need to be carried, right? Still, because they're not there yet, right? So that is quite possible. It happens all the time. But no, eventually, all we know about the way cities and cars and buses and things work in the spiritual world, they are really a reflection of our all collective creation. So that is something that all the spirits in that scenario will create or project through their thoughts and create that environment so they live on, right? Now, we know a lot about Nos Solar based on Andrello's descriptions, but the reality is that Nos Solar is actually very close to a city on Earth, still in evolution basis, right? So there's like a very long road ahead of us that we're not even allowed to know yet because we probably don't even understand, right? So I think humanity in a few years, a few hundred years, I don't know, will slowly learn more and more about even more and more evolved ways of existence in the spiritual world. For example, in other planets and other galaxies, like the entire universe inhabited by spirits. Just we don't even know how to connect that idea yet, right? So we're very early in that stage of developing. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. And if you guys have more questions in the end, we can have a little discussion. So, summary then. So, what is heaven, right? So, heaven is an interesting concept. We can certainly spend a lot of time just talking about the book Heaven How and other theological concepts of heaven. But the reality is heaven is a place not bound by a location or not bound by features. It's a place where the collective spirits that live in that place all share the same true love and the same high vibrations of love that interconnect them. So they project an environment of love around them. And that is really what heaven is in that concept, right? So it's not physical, it's not material, right? It's not a place. It is really a state, a collective state of spirits, right? And do we know how it is or where it is and what? No, we don't know. We can't really. I don't think our minds are really capable as a spirit to visualize that. Anything you hear about people saying about heaven is not heaven because in a way the concept of perfection, right? Because anything we know about things that are better than us are very limited on the scale of perfection. So let's say if the scale of perfection is from here to the moon, right? The scale from 0 to max, we're probably moved a few centimeters off the ground, right? So and we don't know anything really more than that. So that's what the spirits are telling us, right? So, for example, and I mentioned the spirits, the Nosolar experience here, which is, I think, is a great way of relating to it, right? So, how Nosolar is still, an evolved city compared to our existence, but it's still very connected to us, and there's a lot more above that, right? As Jean Louis mentions in his own books, right? So, well, what about hell, right? So, what is that? So, again, is the opposite of that. So the concept of hell, like really hell, and as an entity doesn't exist, right? But what it is, as a concept, is the location or the collective, not the location, but the collective vibration of a number of spirits that are vibrating in a very negative way or in a very low vibration state that are still connected to hatred, to the antithesis of love, let's put it this way, right? And they're still tightly bound to their mistakes, they're tightly bound to, the negativity that they create around them, and they collective project around them the atmosphere that of suffering, of pain, of fire, like all this very aggressive and destructive images, right? That are really represented their own state of mind, right? Collectively. Okay. So that is what it is. Now, and then the good news about all of this is that, again, no one's telling them really what to do, where to go. Obviously, some spirits take advantage of that and use that impression in our minds of what hell is based on religions, right? And use that to control other spirits. That is well known and that happens in the spiritual world. But the good news about all of this is that, in a way, you can see how the road to move out of that state is clear ahead. It's just we have to go through the hiccups to get there, right? But we're going to have some examples of that. And so one example is here, and sorry for a few typos you're going to see here in the slide, but heaven. So the Between Heaven and Earth, which is this book here by Andrea Louise that we're going to bring in here, is a great example to discuss those scenarios, right? Because it gives us the complex relationship network between a number of spirits, how their state of mind allowed them to live in some sort of a pain, suffering mode, which some people call hell, right? Or in other ways, and how can you actually move out of that road into a road of cure and evolution, right? So this book, for example, starts with a prayer, and Evelina is praying to help her mother, right? Odila, to help Zumira, which is her stepmother, right? Um, and the interesting fact here is that she doesn't know, but Odila is really the person that is causing the suffering right now to Zumira because of a very, very complicated past they have, right? So that prayer gets redirected, right, to the group of Angela Luis and Claudencio and Hilario that are going to come down to earth to guide and help those spirits, right? So this story is a very complicated story from a sense of previous existences and relationships that they build, but at the same time gives us a perfect example of life in the spiritual world being something very similar to our current existence, but without the boundaries of the body. In other words, we truly show who we are. We're still stuck in the same ideas, and give us a message that you got to change now because you're not going to change miraculously when you discarnate, right? So this is the time to change, right? And that's what really Angela Luis is telling us, right? So the issue here is that Zumira now, when she joins the family, right, of Evelina and Amaro, uh, she is jealous about the relationship of the kids with the father, right? And unfortunately, Julio, which is the little kid in the family, adventurously walk into the ocean and drowns. And she had a chance to change things. She didn't, right? She kind of in that moral conundrum, right? It's like, what do I do? It's like, do I want to get rid of him? Do I want to save him? And and she doesn't act, although it's not completely her fault because Julio was also on a path to commit suicide, and that's another part of the story. But that creates a very, very challenging situation between Odila, which is the discarnated mother of Julio, and Zumira, which actually living with her husband now. So that relationship that you can see highlighted by those little connection lines, right, between the two spirits. These are two spirits, one discarnated, one incarnated in sleep. How that feather of connection there is really continuing post existences, and it will continue through multiple existences until it's completely settled, right? And that's spiritual life, basically. Okay. And this is a short summary of the story. And I don't want to tell you all the story, but just to show you how complicated things are in the spiritual world. And that's why, if you have a trouble with someone in your family right now, I'll tell you, go there right now, talk to them, sort things out, right? Because if you're thinking that ignoring that problem will save you, I'll tell you, no, it will probably give you a lot more trouble because when you discarnate, that problem still exists. It's still in your mind, so it still exists because that's who you are. And the other person still gonna have the same problem. And now you can't hide, you can't fake. You're there, you're an open book, and you're gonna be clashing each other because there's no boundaries, physical boundaries anymore. You can't disconnect from Facebook, doesn't work. You can't turn off your cell phone, it's not gonna work. Every time you think, the other spirit connects. That's how the connection occurs. So, in other words, you're going to be living through the exact same problem you avoided for the last 50 years, right? So, again, tell you this. This is really good advice. The time for we to sort out our challenges and our difficulties with others and family and things, is not tomorrow. It's actually right now. It's probably past already. We're given another chance, but we can still do it, right? So it's just an example to see how complicated things are. So in the story, Mario Silva is one of the characters incarnated now. So both the ones are incarnated now, right? Um, he has a lot of problem with Zumira. Zumira, remember, is the person that's living with Amaro now, because she used to be a former fiancée of Mario. But not only that, so Mario in the past also had some issues, right? With not only Armando, with Julio, and with another person called Lina, right? He used to be Stevis in the past incarnation. So they're all connected from a previous incarnation. See how this is going, right? So Antonina now is also incarnated, but she used to be Lola, which had a relationship with all of them, right, in the past, and a lot of a lot of things happened, right? So they cheated. She broke up with one, married the other, and now they're all incarnated again, right? Zumira, which is the person now suffering the consequences of Odila persecution, right, discarnated. So she left Mario, now lives with Amaro, right? But she used to be Lina in the past. And Lina had a relationship with Esteves, Mario, right? Armando now, and Julio. So think about this. Julio, the kid that she just allowed to go to water and drown, used to be their love affair in the previous relationship, in the previous incarnation. See how complicated this is getting, right? And then it goes on. And Julio, which is the kid that just drowned, right, actually had drowned before in the previous incarnation because of a broken heart love story with the other person. So now, putting all of that together, you can see how the fabrics of the networks of connections in the spiritual world are very much a reflection of what we're doing now, and they're still very much alive when we discarnate it. So that does not go away. It actually gets even more and more complicated with time, right? And Julio now drowned again, right? But he's still suffering the pain, the consequences from his poisoning from the past, from the drowning from the past, and he's in a very bad shape, spiritually speaking. And the good part of the story is that it's going to show us how all these characters in the story can unite together to help this Julio to reincarnate. And this is such a beautiful story. And it's gonna break all those negative connections that were built up over time. So it's all there's always time, right, for us to fix those things, but we should start working on those now. Because the spirit life really is really like a real continuation of the real life, right? That's the real life, right? So we got to work hard on that. Okay. So now the spirits heaven and hell, the book Heaven and Hell brings a number of spirits categorized by happy spirits and suffering spirits and hardened spirits. And I highly recommend you having a look at that because that can help you understand a little bit more of who we are, right? When we discriminate. So for example, in the happy spirits, a few examples here, but you know, Mr. Sampson and Samuel and Joe Bard, all of them were part of this Preparatory Society, Spirit Society by Kardec. And Mr. Sampson, for example, he asked to be invoked right after he discredited, and he was, and he tells them right there, like what happened. He's happy, he's not perfect, but he's doing a lot of things to improve himself, and he completed his mission. It's a great story to see, depending on what you do here, how that transition goes. Same idea with Samuel. He's like, I'm so happy being free of the body. He can see his body. He disconnected. He's completely aware of it. So it was a very easy transition for him, right? And he tells it, right? And he describes, and I'll read this here. So although I suffered dreadfully in my final years, like when he was ill, like in his body, he did not pass over in agony. My death was like a sleep without struggle or shock. Since I had no fear about my future, telling us about his moral evolution, I didn't try to cling to life. I didn't want to hold on unnecessarily because he knew he had completed his journey, right? And consequently, he didn't have to struggle during his last moments, right? So the separation occurred pain free, right? This is a great example of, obviously a spirit that is morally evolved and understands the transition and is ready to go, right? But obviously, the book's going to be bring us other examples, right, of the opposite, right? It's like in suffering spirits, for example. And Lisbeth, for example, she used to have a lot of power, a lot of money, right? But she was very selfish, right? And she lived in Prussia in 1700s, right? Cold-hearted, stuck to material things, stuck to money and to richness, right? And now when she disconnects, you realize that all of that, everything she was so fond of and connected to, is not real. Okay? The only thing that is real is that who she is, and she is very selfish, right? So that's that's a really real trauma to those spirits, right? And then she teaches about the importance of real repent, like regret and reparation. And she's telling us when she describes in the heaven and hell, she's describing to us the importance of not only saying, yeah, I was bad, but I did, but also saying, I'm gonna actually fix it. I'm gonna go back and get it fixed, right? And that's where the stage she is now. So Prince Huron, for example, he is described as the example of lack of humility, right? Same idea. Once powerful, succumb to his own pride, right? And he says that to us. Pride, repeat that word constantly so that you never forget that it is the source of all suffering that afflicts us. You can imagine how that's painful for him, right? Yes, I abused the power and favor I enjoyed. I was harsh and cruel towards those below me, those who had bowed down before all my caprices and satisfy all my depravities. I wanted nobility, fortune, honors, and for myself. I succumbed to the burden because it was above my strength. Now, think about this. Like, this is a prince, like someone who had enjoyed a lot of power, and this artificial respect, right, from other individuals that are respected by fear, not by really being a moral person, right? And now he's looking back, and all the spirits that were below him through this incarnation are actually above him in a moral authority, right? Because that really the only thing that counts in the spiritual world. Again, another big lesson for us. A big lesson for us. Like, what are we going to do, right? Can we change things now? Because that's what he's telling us. Like, are you going that road? Kind of turn it, because I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. Now, if we're all telling ourselves now, it's like, I don't know, like, I don't know what's going to happen, like, we know. Spiritism is telling us all the time, and other religions too. Like, so many people are telling us this, right? Telling us that, you know, this is what's going to happen. So we got to act now, right? There's really no questions. There's not a lot of questions, right? We know what to do. So that is the movement, right? That the Spiritism in this book obviously is trying to tell us. We have hardened spirits, for example, like La Pommeraye, which now is criminal, no repentance, defiant when he's describing his existence to the um, to the group when he's giving his message. And important is that, see, the fact that he suffers the most is that he cannot hide himself from his thoughts. Look how painful that is. Now, this is another message to all of us. We all have that little thought inside our minds that we keep our existence trying to control it, to get rid of. Right? Now, imagine one day you wake up and that thought is basically all around you. You're basically wearing it around you. Can you imagine that? Right? And that is the basically it is actually the punishment for the Pomeranian, and also light. So the light that pierces him, he describes, right? the fact that he's now exposed to who he is, right? And that is suffering. It's like he's being stabbed or pierced by it. Right? Angel is another example. She's the opposite. She's talking about time wasted. Basically, she describes not um, having done anything with her experience. Had the chances, opportunities, signed up for it, was ready for it, didn't do it. Right? It's like, it's like someone that prepares like the entire life to do something, and when they're deployed to do it, they just say, "Yeah, I don't want to do it." Right? I'll just sit down here and wait. Right? And that when you go back to the spiritual world, you're gonna remember all of it and say, "Oh my goodness, I actually been working 100 years just to get this opportunity, and I went there, I sat down and did nothing." That's painful. Same idea for us. Like, do you really have that drive to say, like, there's something in my mind that tells me that I need to do something? Do it, right? Because that's your conscience talking to you, right? And you gotta do it. You gotta do it, right? So we're running out of time now because we started a little bit late. So I'm gonna finish here with the story or Slisgol, which is another spirit that is called the terrestrial expiations. Just to give you another perspective of now the spirits that are going and coming back as an expiation for what they've done. And this is a great experience because he was a poor Jew that used to help. He collected, begged to actually help others, right? And he did this entire life. And now he describes his life. He was a king, a tyrant, right? Completely abused everything. So he discriminated, went through 250 years of moral suffering, right? And then decided to come back as a beggar to actually help others that are harder than him. And now he discriminates peacefully. So again, just to give you an example that it takes time, it takes effort, but all of us are going to have chances. All of us are going to have a chance to come back and do it better, right? So now, important thing is um, oh yeah, was it Sandra? Right, that's right. So Sandra's connection to the city of Vilna, right? um, but it's important to remember this, right? That we gotta work now, right? Because nothing really is gonna change dramatically when we discriminate. We're still gonna be, really this person here with the same issues, same positive things, same negative things, but now in a much, much like a much more open book way, right? So we're going to be exposed to who we are. And I can tell you from all we know in Spiritism, that is going to be our mission, right? When we to work on that, right? So if we work it now, we're going to save a lot of time after we go, right? Um, so we're right on time now for to the end of our lecture. And I'll let you guys if you have any questions now, any comments that you want to post, and this is we can have probably about 5 minutes of questions, um, and then after that we're going to have our final prayer, and we're going to be ready with you guys again next Sunday. Okay, so I don't see, um, just checking the chat now, see if you guys are still there. There you go. Still around. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra, for being here. I know you guys are enjoying there. It's very nice to see you connected. Um, and yeah, so if we don't have any other comments or questions, we're going to take this moment to, you know, um, do our final prayer. Keeping in mind everything we discussed today. And maybe if we do, and like transformation doesn't occur immediately, or change doesn't occur immediately. So maybe if we go by the idea of changing like 1% a day, you see it's going to be quite quick, right? So we can change 1% a day, and we're going to be there very quickly, right? um, and or if you change a tiny little bit a day, right, it's still fine because we have a lot of things, right? So but we're still going to get there. So as long as we're in the right road, right, even if it's a tiny little baby step at a time, it's great. Take it, celebrate it, live with it, right? Don't try to be another person next day. It's not going to happen, right? You're going to be frustrated, you're going to fail, right? Because you can't do that, right? Don't think that you're going to be discarnate and be like, oh, like I'm discarnated, like I'm king. I'm going to go to somewhere in this beautiful fields of green and all these beautiful angels flying around me. I don't think that's going to happen, right? For very few, maybe. Because even if you're really morally elevated, you don't want to be there. You're actually going to be helping someone. Think about this. Like, even if you're morally elevated to say, you know what, I actually did, I paid all my debts, I've learned, I've been through it, and now I'm going to discriminate. In that scenario, if you're morally elevated and you're given a chance to say, you're going to be in idleness or you're going to be back and helping others, which one are you going to choose? Like, if you choose idleness, you're probably not that morally elevated, right? Because who wants to do that? Like, if the universe is growing together and we're only going to be perfect when everybody's perfect, so we got to work hard, right? So think about that. It's a little food for thought. Okay, so let us take this moment to again think about our Master Jesus, our Father, Mother gods, and everyone around us, our families and friends, everyone in the world today. They're going through so many challenges, trials and expiations here in Canada, in Ukraine, and in other places around the world, every single country, for all the populations that are still going through COVID and the challenges of disease, everything that is related to it. For all our leaders and politicians, think about them too. And let us send good vibrations so they can make good decisions. Let us avoid deep in our hearts to contribute to more conflict and pain. And we can do that. And we ask for help, our Lord, our God. So you can give us the energy to control the instincts of hatred inside of our hearts. So we can more and more listen and open our hearts to differences, to understand that we're not the same, but we can live together united by love. That is really the glue that connects the universe. And let us take this opportunity to take one step on the right direction. Thank you, God, and so be it. All right, thank you, everyone. And we're a few minutes late today, and I apologize again for the technical issues. We're going to be back with you guys on Sunday, and follow us if you're watching this afterwards. Thank you so much. It's very it's really a great opportunity, right? So we can connect even it's virtually. Okay, and hopefully soon we'll be back connected in person. Okay, have a great rest of your Sunday, and take care. Bye bye.